All right, folks. So, a question I get often asked is, what is the best bug out bag radio? In this video, I'm going to attempt to answer that. We're going to talk about a couple of different scenarios and a couple of different radios. So, let's go ahead and get started. Now, I just want to throw a disclaimer out there that I am not an expert. I am just a guy with a camera, laptop, a radio, and an internet connection. The reason I put this out there is that topics like bugging out, bug out bags, and ham radios are all very controversial. And I'm fine having a robust conversation. Hopefully, we get some good questions and comments down below. But what I don't want to do is have it turn into a name calling fest, which can happen when talking about bug out bags. I think it's important to note that the conversation around bugging out and bug out bags is largely influenced by individual experience and perspective. And everybody's individual experience and perspective is not the same, so people don't look at solving this problem the same way. Anyhow, that being said, I also wanted to say that I don't consider myself a prepper, but a prepping enthusiast. So let's go ahead and get started. So I wanted to really start the conversation by describing what a bug out bag is. And the reason I do that is because we are going to be talking about putting a radio in one of these things. And so for me, and for the purpose of this discussion, is a bug out bag is a man-portable bag containing the items that you would need to sustain for at least 72 hours. Things that you would include in a bug out bag, and this is a high level list, it's certainly not all encompassing for everyone. But you would have things like medicine and first aid, you'd have clothing and shelter, you'd have a sleeping system, maybe a hammock or a backpack or a sleeping bag, food and water, packaged or a method of securing like water filters or traps or maybe a rifle for hunting. You'd have maps and compasses because you need to orientate and you need to direct yourself from one location to another. Tools, you would have tools in there like firearms, knives, multi-tools, axes or saws. You'd have flashlights and a phone in there most likely, and some renewable power. And for this conversation, the renewable power is a big thing. And what I'm talking about are rechargeable batteries via solar panel or something along those lines. I don't think hand crank is a very, very viable option. And then the last thing is off-grid communications, and that's where the radio comes in. So let's talk a little bit about what is bugging out. And again, for this conversation, it's when conditions have deteriorated at your current location to the point where you have to leave. You probably either do or do not have a predetermined location. Maybe you have a bug out location. Maybe you're making yourself a refugee, or maybe you're going to sort of a government camp or a FEMA camp. Where you may decide to go nomadic, right? You don't have any destination, but you know that you have to leave where you are. You may be in a vehicle, you may be on foot. And so the on foot part is why this needs to be a man portable, or I guess a people portable system. We're not going to talk about Hamo cans or Pelican cases full of radios because I don't believe that they're really man portable for a very long period of time. Now, you might have a Pelican case radio configuration in your car, but that makes that car a bug out vehicle. It's not a bug out bag. Do I realistically think somebody's going to be able to lug a 40-pound Pelican case around for 2 or 3 days while maybe walking 50 miles to a safe location? I just don't see that as a viable option. You might, and if you do, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. So what I wanted to start out with is, what is a bug out bag radio? And as you would expect, it's a tool for off-grid communications. It can be either for receiving or for receive and transmit. And that's kind of important because there are lots of receiving radios that are very helpful in these types of situations. I have uses a renewable power source, so that would be something that's battery operated or 100% solar operated. Small and lightweight. It's appropriate for your skill set, and this is where the bulk of this conversation is going to take place. I've broken skill sets down into novice, intermediate, and advanced. And from my perspective, novice is going to be somebody who is like a regular person, right? Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your mother, maybe it's your nephew. But it's really just somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience using radios. Just a regular person, and you're going to expect them to be able to use these communication devices. Intermediate is where I would place people who may be radio enthusiasts, electronic enthusiasts, somebody with a technician class amateur radio license. And then I have advanced, and that would be somebody who has some specific expertise in radio communications. likely a general or an extra class ham or amateur radio user. Somebody who knows what they're doing, has a more sophisticated setup. The other one is it's something that meets your financial requirements. So you're really going to have to view this with looking at the cost versus the requirements versus the capability. I mean, you can go out and you can buy a scanner for $75, or you can buy one for $750. And I really think that you have to take a look and say, hey, how much do I have to invest in this? What do I really need? And then also how capable is this radio? Is it fit for use or fit for purpose? And at the end of the day, you're going to be looking at likely more than one radio. I know that in my bug out bag, I have 2 radios most of the time. Sometimes it's 3. That said, let's talk about what do you need? What are your requirements? And this is just kind of a brain dump of different features or capabilities. The first requirement being budget. I can't buy a $500 radio if I've only got $50. I think at a base level or minimum level, you're going to want local broadcast AM, and FM, right? So power goes out. I want to flip. I want to flip the radio. I want to hear the news, hear what's going on. A lot of these bug out scenarios are the result of weather events, and I know everybody wants it to be electromagnetic pulse, virus infection, a zombie apocalypse. But the reality is that there's going to be flooding. There is going to be a volcano. There is going to be a hurricane. There's going to be a snowstorm. That really are the reasons why you may have to use a bug out bag. And so the NOAA weather broadcasts are fantastic things to have access to. So you can hear what the forecast is going to be. You can hear if there's any alerts. The next thing is short range two-way communications, like 2 meters and 70 centimeter ham bands, for example. You can also throw in here FRS, GMRS, or MERS. FRS and MERS are unlicensed. GMRS does require a license, but the short range communications, and you may need to stay in contact with your family and friends. And we'll talk about that some more. But a lot of people are like, I don't have any use for that in a SHTF or bug out scenario. But I got to tell you, I think that the short range communications are probably the most important for keeping communication with your friends, your family, and maybe any partners or people that you're working with. The next thing I have on there is shortwave reception, and this is really for medium and long range broadcast, whether it's mostly AM. And the reason I think this is so important is that there may be an event that takes out a region. So let's like say you're in the Southwest, and there is no local broadcast AM or FM. With shortwave, I can still listen to other national and international news broadcasts to understand how bad a catastrophe could particularly be, or maybe there's some news about this is the services that are available to you. This is where you can go. These are the dangers that you can expect, or here's further weather forecasting. You can get a lot of information with shortwave reception, and what's nice about that is that you're not communicating out, right? So when you make a signal out, you're really throwing up a flag saying, "Hey, I'm here." You're announcing your presence. That might not be something you always want to do. The next thing I have on here is really longer range. I have ARS for amateur radio services. This could be AM. Most of this now is single sideband, and you maybe you just want a radio that you can hear this type of information, or maybe you want a RX and TX you want to transmit as well. This is going to require the use of an HF radio, which makes things a lot more complicated. And the last thing I have on here is digital communications. From a short range standpoint, maybe you want to do some APRS position reporting, something like that. Or maybe with your HF rig, you're looking at doing some long range communications, like you're looking at some, FT8 or RIDI or something along those lines, where you can do some communications for pretty far distance. There's a trade-off with the equipment that you need for that. So anyhow, I put this in here. It's a link to a wiki on the radio spectrum, and the radio spectrum is pretty big. And this conversation really is only centered around some of the spectrum, really low frequency to ultra high frequency. I'm not going to read through all this, but it covers things like AM and FM broadcast bands, amateur radio bands. things like that, FRS, GMRS bands, the things that you could take advantage of to communicate to people in a man-portable system. Anyhow, I encourage you to go check out this website and see what it's all about. Some good information out there. So when we talk a little bit about a novice, remember this is regular folk with limited to no radio experience, or maybe a little bit. Um, you know, the first thing I would recommend to somebody is go out and buy a small AM or FM radio, if that's all you can get. It's some of these are powered, like in the picture, with a hand crank, maybe a AA or AAA battery, 9-volt battery. When you take a look at the top two, the red radios, I think they're both sub $25. And in some cases, you get what you pay for. Maybe these are fantastic value. I don't know. One's got a flashlight. One's got a hand crank. What I can tell you is that you're going to need a better flashlight than that in your bug out bag. If that's all you have, I think that's at least it's something. But maybe you want a dedicated flashlight. Maybe you want rechargeable batteries, or maybe you just want this radio. I don't know. What I would typically recommend for somebody is this Texan. It's a PL380 in the lower left-hand corner. And what's really nice about that radio is it's less than $50. I get the $50 is expensive, but it's a very good radio, and it has AM/FM broadcast as well as some short wave capabilities. So you can pick up some of those stations that are a little bit further away. Now, this is a really small radio that runs off of 2 AA batteries, so you're not going to get international shortwave communications on the regular, but you may pick them up. But things like this, you can pick up half a continent away, no problem. Pretty handy radio. And the second bullet point is really around NOAA weather. Now, those two red radios, I think the one with the hand crank does give you some weather stations, but so do the FRS and GMRS radios that are in yellow, and then there's a Midland one over on the lower right-hand side of the screen. Both of those will give you the weather report, so that's pretty handy, and they'll also cover some of that short-range communications. You can use the FRS frequencies unlicensed. So maybe you have a spouse or a nephew, like I was talking about, or your aunt. You can give her one of these radios fired up on FRS, and you can communicate no problem. A lot of people will say things like, if it's a real emergency, I can use my ham radio, or anybody can use it with no problem. I think that's true to an extent, but like if you take a look at situations where people are displaced because of a flood, maybe during the actual flood event itself, you could maybe defend that you have a life or serious property damage situation that required you to use a ham frequency or an ARS frequency. But afterwards, maybe you still need to communicate with your friends and your family, and FRS might be the right solution. So regardless if you're a novice or an expert, I do advocate the use of like FRS or the availability of FRS radios within your kit or your system. And that's why I said, you're probably going to be looking at 2 or 3 different radios. The last thing I have over here is a basic scanner. And I put that on here because they're a little bit easier to use. You fire one of these up, and you can listen to local public channels like police, fire, emergency services. In a lot of cases, these are being moved over to digital as opposed to an FM broadcast. So these things are becoming increasingly limited into what you can get. But you can pick up a basic scanner for about $75. And in a lot of cases, you can pick up some pretty interesting emergency services transmissions. So the next thing I kind of want to talk a little bit more about is intermediate. Now, I left on here, having the FRS, the GMRS, or MERS radios because I really do think that there's a value, as I mentioned before, in the ability to communicate with unlicensed users in a non-emergency situation. It might be a situation of where things are escalated because of a pending or a post-disaster situation, but maybe it's not a real emergency at that time. The other thing is I put a lower to mid-range shortwave radio, and this is actually the shortwave radio, the Texan PL880 that I carry. I have 2 of these. So I have one for when I go camping or hiking or any of that kind of stuff, and I also have one that I keep in a bug-out bag. It's a fantastic radio. I can't say enough good things about it. It's a little bit larger. It runs off of an 18650 lithium-ion battery, but it has fantastic reception. I regularly listen to shortwave broadcasts from other continents. It has the ability to listen or receive single sideband so I can listen to all of the ham bands. It's front key pad programmable, so I don't have to scroll through thousands of frequencies. I can just type in the frequency that I want to use. Um, Very, very nice radio. That is a little bit bigger, but it's not too big that you couldn't include it into a bug out bag. And it also covers the ability to listen to local AM and FM broadcast. So I get a lot of capability for that radio. And then also I have on here is a scanner. It's a more robust scanner. Maybe you have a digital scanner. These are, could be around 250 to 300, 350 bucks, but it would allow you to listen to, not only FM emergency services, but maybe some digital emergency services, non-trunked. Um, these require a little bit more programming, a little bit more knowledge to use, but something like that would be potentially very helpful in a bug out scenario. And then on this one, I have the addition of dual band 2 meters or 70 centimeter ham radios. These are required licensed use. All right, so in the lower left-hand corner, what I have depicted there are dual band ham handheld radios, starting with the Bofang UV5R. It's an extremely popular radio, but unfortunately, a lot of people buy these. They don't know how to use them. They're unlicensed, and they throw them into bug out bags, and they think that their communications are covered. The reality is that you should be licensed. You should have a pretty good understanding of how these things work, be able to program, be able to use them. And it's not entirely simple at first. And then if you expect to be able to use these with somebody else, you're not going to hand a Baofeng to somebody for the first time and have them work it successfully, which again lends itself to the conversation about the FRS or GMRS radios. But also next to the Baofeng, I have the Yaesu FT70D. This seems to be the hot new radio to recommend to people who are getting into ham radio, but also people who might need a good dual band HT with some digital capability. They're about 150 bucks, give or take. Very capable radio, uses a lithium ion battery, so it's an upgrade from the FT60, which is my current dual band HT. But really, when you start talking about what you should or shouldn't have on this screen, I would recommend everybody have a dual band HT that they know how to use. I would recommend access to FRS or GMRS or MERS radios, and then either shortwave radio and potentially a scanner. So I know it's a lot, but I do take the communication stuff pretty seriously. If I had to peel something out of there, maybe it would be making sure that non-licensed users that are part of my friends or family, they have the FRS or GMRS radios. I'd have like a dual band HT scanner, and I'd feel really strongly about the shortwave radio. I know that's a lot of gear. And the next thing I have on here is that you also may want to look at some third-party antennas. I don't have anything pictured here, but you can really extend the range of your HT with like a roll-up J-pole antenna. You can also use a roll-up J-pole antenna with a mobile radio, and they have an ICOM here in the lower right-hand corner. And I really don't suggest carrying something like that. It adds a lot of bulk. It does get you some more capability with higher power output and maybe better sensitivity and selectivity. But you also the blue box is a battery. You're also going to need to really carry that around as well. And that's a lithium battery. Sealed lead are significantly heavier. I think it's a lithium ion of comparable power. I think it's about a quarter of the weight of a lead battery. But I got to figure out a way how to power that with solar panels. And once that battery's drained, it's going to take some time to drain it back up. The other thing I have on here is that you may include an Android tablet. There's some ham applications specifically around APRS that run on there, and just gives you a little bit more capability and some electronics capability, not just communications capability. Maybe you could store documents, you can store pictures, diagrams, stuff like that on the Android tablet. All right, moving along into advanced. Again, I left the FRS or GMRS because I do think the ability to communicate again with unlicensed users is huge. I put mid-range shortwave radio in there, but I did take it off. You get a lot of capabilities with some of the HF rigs that are pictured here to be able to pick up shortwave broadcasts. But one of the things is that with that Texon radio, I can have that up and running and operational within minutes. I don't have to set up antennas. I don't have to set up power supplies. I don't have to have a radio that requires setup time. The other thing I have on here is a digital trunking scanner. And so this is a step up from the intermediate scanner, which was a step up from the Novice scanner. This scanner allows you to listen to like P25, phase 1 and phase 2 emergency systems. So, we're talking a very expensive scanner here, $500, give or take. But it gives you full access to emergency services. And I got to tell you, one of the first questions I always get asked by anybody who sees a radio or interested in radio is, hey, how can I listen to emergency services if a catastrophe happens? The easiest answer for me is scanner. Right? You want to look at a scanner. And then the next thing you say is, well, what should I get for my bug out bag? So I think a scanner is probably the first and most important piece of equipment, followed by short range communications, FRS, dual band HT, and then shortwave capability. I'm not going to carry around an HF rig in my bug out bag. It's not something I'm willing to commit to. And I do have some advanced dual band HTs that I have here. One is the ASU FT2D, has built-in APRS, so some digital capability there. It has position reporting, messaging, very powerful lithium-ion battery. Fantastic radio. I think they're about $350. And then next to that is probably the most capable radio I believe is on the market. It's a Kenwood D74. Again, APRS, digital communications via D-Star, dual band, dual VFO, $500 handheld radio, but fantastic piece of equipment that has a broadband receive. Also, the Yaesu does. So you can also pick up, albeit AM and not SSB, you can also pick up FM transmissions. You can pick up AM transmissions. Both of those are very, very capable handhelds. Talking a little bit about the high frequency, or I have HR, should say HF multiband radio. This is obviously a licensed use thing as well. And depicted here, I've got an Elecraft E3, which is a very capable QRP radio, and QRP means low power. So when you use your blue Bioenno battery, it drains a little bit slower. I believe this goes up to 10 watts. It may go to 20. I'm not entirely familiar with it. But at the top of the picture here, you see some antenna configurations. And so with the ability to use HF, you're looking at more sophisticated antenna configurations, which means more weight that you're carrying, and it means more time to deploy and tear down. Some people are great at it. And then below, in the lowest corner on the right-hand side, is the Yaesu 891. It is a fantastic 100-watt radio, so it's really going to drain that battery. But it has digital modes built into it, AM, FM, single sideband. It's a very capable wideband receive, wideband TX radio, and you'll see a lot of people who will combine these with like Android tablets or Raspberry Pis to enhance their digital mode communications. And also on here terminal node controllers, and use those to modulate signals between like a computer or a tablet and your radio. These are very sophisticated setups. Like I said, they require a high layer of expertise and add a lot of bulk and weight to your system. A lot of people would say, well, there are man-portable communication systems, but the more you invest in a man-portable system, communications related, the more you're taking away from other things like food procurement, sheltering, first aid. All that being said, there is a guy on YouTube. His name is Julian, over on the Survival Tech Nord channel, and he's probably putting out the most advanced man-portable communication systems. He does some fantastic stuff. So I'll include a link to his channel below, and you should check him out if you haven't already. It really is an educational experience where you can learn a lot. So really, in closing, the best radio is the one that you can use. And you got to make sure that you practice so you know how the radio works. You have to make sure, you have the radio. It's in your bug out bag. You got to make sure that it works, and you got to make sure you know how to operate the radio. That said, my recommendation is going to be for a licensed use of a 2 meter, 70 centimeter dual band HT radio. We talked a little bit about very low end $25 models up to mid-range, $150 models. I would suggest taking a real look at scanners for emergency services and seeing what you could do there, and then maybe coupling that with a smaller shortwave radio. anyhow, like I said earlier, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and post them below, and we can talk about it. I really appreciate everybody hanging in there and watching this video. If you want to see more content of a similar nature, go ahead and click like or subscribe. Thanks, everyone.